In this section, we will be talking about the use of the Enochian material by the Golden Dawn, an early 20th century occult group dedicated to the study thereof. The Golden Dawn originated with the decipherment of a series of manuscripts in a code originally by Johann Trithemius, and each degree of those described in the initial 7 of the Golden Dawn system uses some form or other of the Enochian material of John Dee. To begin, let us look at Mather's model of the pentagram, which attributes each of the 4 elements to a place on the zodiac round, such that the 4 elements form the base of a pyramid on the zodiac round, the capstone of which would be the 5th element, spirit, and as following the progression of the zodiac as given by the seasons of the main year. We find Aquarius in midwinter, Taurus mid-spring, Leo the summer solstice, and Scorpio the autumnal equinox are given in a counterclockwise order. However, due to the effect of Earth's polar precession, we know the zodiac may be read not only according to the seasons of the main year, but also to the solar aeons by which we measure the ice ages. And when it is read in this fashion, then Mather's arrangement of the zodiac would follow in a clockwise order, attributing to Scorpio the element water, to Leo the element fire, to Taurus the element earth, and to Aquarius the element air, again with spirit above all. And this is where most research into Mather's pentagram ends. However, there is another method of reading Mather's pentagram, hinted at here by the color coding. To understand this method, let us turn our attention to this rendition of a heptagram inside of a heptagon by Aleister Crowley. From his Book of Thoth, they are attributed to a fellow member of the Golden Dawn. In this model, which I have color-coded according to the spectrum of a prism, we see the numbers as they are attributed to the Kamiya number squares for each of the 7 planets. Thus, 3, the number of the planet Saturn, is attributed to the Kamiya number square of 3 by 3. Thus, the square of Saturn is really a square of 9 individual cells, and so forth for all of the other planetary Kamiya as well, such that the square of Saturn is 9, the square of Jupiter 16, the square of Mars 25, and so forth, in a simple clockwise order around the array. However, there is another method of reading this system, across the legs of the heptagram as opposed to along the legs of the heptagon, and this yields a heptagram of the days of the week from within it the heptagon of the planetary Kamiya, which, however, shuffles the order of the color-coded arrangement of the 7 planetary Kamiya, such that every other planetary Kamiya will be the following day of the week, because the interior heptagram on which we have traced the days of the week is a skip 2 measure inside the larger heptagon. However, we can also note that there is another heptagram of skip 3 measure at the innermost center, which may represent both Dee's Sigillum Dei Meth as well as Crowley's Star of Babylon. And so we can see, returning to Mather's model of the pentagram, by applying this method of following the legs of the stellated polygon, that Mather's model yields the order of the elements according to ancient alchemy, by following the legs of the pentagram along a counterclockwise motion, proceeding from water as gravity, to air as electromagnetism, to fire as nuclear fission, and earth as nuclear fusion. However, now we may also see that there is another way of reading this series of elements, as according to along the legs of the pentagram, and that is clockwise around the array to yield the order of the elements as they are given by the Kabbalists, such that the four elements are seen as an emanation following from spirit in the order fire, air, water, earth. We may begin our second examination of basic Golden Dawn material as a prerequisite for examining the Enochian aspects thereof by looking at what Mathers called the Concourse of the Forces, depicting the relationship between the 12 signs of the Zodiac and the 4 elemental forces representing 4 seasons of the main year, as they are meant to be read from top to bottom and from left to right, such that for Aries at the top, we would read earth from the left to fire to water, then to air on the right, so that the season governed by fire on the left would be summer, and the season governed by water on the left would be autumn. The season governed by air on the left would be winter, and so forth, such that the season of spring would be split with Aries in the center. Next, we will be looking at the attribution of a trait to each sign of the zodiac, such that there will be 3 such traits per each of the 4 seasons. And here we see that because Aries is actually the second sign of the zodiac attributed to the season of spring, then the common attribute would actually be the first to occur for each season, followed by the movable attribute, and finally the fixed trait occurs for each season. And so we see this pattern proceeds throughout, displaying the seasons of the zodiac as elements. However, to visualize this object in the shape that Mathers himself may have imagined it, we can graph this chart onto the shape of a torus, depicting the zodiac round as Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and finally back to Aries, in such a way that to measure from top to bottom on Mathers' initial chart, we would rotate the chart as graphed onto a torus in a counterclockwise motion, following which we can also see the 4 elemental seasons, such that fire is summer, water is autumn, air is winter, and earth is spring. However, in this model we may see also that the elemental sign 4th in order is relevant as well, as it occurs on the opposite side from the elements given to rule the seasons of the zodiac. Although note that these elements cannot be read following the same counterclockwise progression, since measured on the same side, they are actually opposite or upside down from their ordinary position as symbols. And so what we find is that this model depicts, for the top of the zodiac, a counterclockwise rotation measured on the right side of the apparatus, and for the opposite side of the apparatus, it depicts a clockwise rotation as measured from the left side, thus following the so-called concourse of the forces from earth in spring to fire in summer to water in autumn, and so forth, according to the signs of the zodiac round, here presented as a torus or hypersphere to depict the simultaneous clockwise and counterclockwise counter-rotation. Here we see the Golden Dawn version of the Table of Union, attributing the elements to rows and columns, to depict the royal cards of each suit from a tarot deck by crossing elemental rows and columns in the order air, water, earth, fire, proceeding from spirit in the upper left. Likewise, here we see the actual Tablet of Union used in Golden Dawn rituals, which differs from the prior diagram only in its use of Enochian letters at the center of each square. However, otherwise it is identical in its attribution of the elements, as here seen on the right side of each square, as well as to the royal cards of the tarot deck, although here seen symbolized by elements on the left side of each square. And although on the Table of Union the above and below aspects of each square are only labeled in spirit, they are actually derived from a complex system developed by MacGregor Mathers, substituting the tetragrammaton, or four-letter Hebrew name of God, for the four elements, in the order Yod equals air, He equals water, Vav equals earth, and He final equals fire, such that for the four watchtowers we would begin in the lower right corner and proceed around counterclockwise. Although in Mather's system there is actually an element, and therefore one of the four letters of the tetragrammaton, in each of the single squares of the system. And we can see from each cardinal or smaller cross that each sub-angle or smaller quadrant is equally divided into the four elements according to the same order given as counterclockwise around the four elements. The crosses of the deacons, of which there are one for each quadrant or elemental watchtower, are derived by assigning a fixed, moving, or common attribute to each of the 12 signs of the zodiac, which are then symbolized according to the planets, using a system combining the three attributes and the four elements. The method of deriving the attributes beneath the Calvary crosses is by far the most complex, and is derived by taking the elements as rows, given here by the tetragrammaton, and as columns, given here by the cherubic sign of each element's season, not to be confused with the list of elements given as according to He, representing earth. However, as for the other elements of the tetragrammaton Yod He Vav, They're all cross-referenced in rows along with the 4 elemental cherubic signs of the seasons in columns to yield once again the signs of the zodiac, here following a diagonal pattern established by the crossing of the elements, in a manner unique to each square of the watchtowers. And in the next section we will be looking at the same patterns as established here, only given a color coding system that will make them even easier to understand. In this section we will be looking at the 4 Enochian watchtowers of John Dee as color-coded according to the system of the Rose-Cross layman depicted here of the Golden Dawn. And so we see here the now familiar Table of Union is color-coded according to the elements as air, pink on yellow, water, orange on blue, earth, red on green, and fire, green on red. And so we see that the order of the elements remains the same: air, water, earth, fire, as emanating from spirit in the upper left-hand most corner, with the left side of each letter square being attributed to the columns of the elements, and the right side of each to the rows of the elements. This same technique is used throughout to generate the 4 elemental watchtowers of air in yellow, water in blue, earth in green, and fire in red. So we see at the center of each elemental watchtower the cross of the deacons, color-coded according to the planets and the signs of the zodiac, divides each of the elemental watchtowers into 4 sub-angles, each governed by a Calvary cross of 10 squares. Each of the sub-angles of the 4 elemental watchtowers, where an element is represented twice, as intersecting in a row and in a column, can be taken to represent the season of the mean year by marking either a solstice or equinox, yielding a system that rotates around the central elemental sub-angles in a counterclockwise motion around the outer 12 sub-angles of the 4 elemental Enochian watchtowers to form a zodiac-based calendar according to an intersortment of the pure 4 elements, color-coded yellow for air, blue for water, green for earth, and red for fire. Here we see the result of graphing the 4 elemental Enochian watchtowers onto the exterior surface of a cube, according to the method for creating an Enochian altar of Aleister Crowley and color-coded according to the Golden Dawn.